A few months ago, a venture capitalist stumbled on this YouTube channel through LinkedIn, and he invited me to come do a couple of proxy projects with him. And IdeaSex obviously has nothing to do with business, right? So this was all very unexpected. And fast forward to today, I have accepted a role as an idea sorceress in the lab of a venture studio. So very happy. It's storytelling, storyboarding, and building businesses really, really fast. It's like all of my favorite things. So I'm like, this is a dream come true. And that being said, I have no idea where it's going. I have zero expectations, but I wanted to share this today because I'm not special. That's right, we're talking about awakening again. Awakening is a journey toward alignment, and everyone can either live in alignment or out of alignment. And I've been trying to figure out how to articulate this process for the longest time because I have had at least half a dozen people tell me that they can't do what I do, that I'm lucky, or that I'm otherwise blessed. And it's not luck, it's not the lottery. There's a method to the madness. The only thing I think I do a little bit differently is I listen to that thing. Turns out you don't have to be Joan of Arc to talk to God, okay? And I don't mean God in like the biblical sense, like not like an old man with a beard sitting on a cloud and judging you for fornicating. That's Sky Daddy, okay? We're not talking about Sky Daddy. We're talking about source, great spirits, the unified energy field, pure consciousness, of which Sky Daddy is a personification. But confession, I did not want to learn how to listen to this thing. In fact, I fought it for years, which we'll talk about a little bit in this video. But when your higher self decides that it's gonna wake your ass up, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. I know a lot of people who gravitate toward this channel are already well along on their spiritual awakening journeys, but I still wanted to make this video because one, awakening is a lifelong thing, and two, this is everything I wish I would have known 5 years ago at the start of my awakening, because it felt very like bleak. I didn't know what to believe. And if I would have known then what I know now, my outlook would have been much more optimistic about all of this. So it's going to be split into two videos. I think this one's going to be a little longer, and I'm very excited to share with you the 7 things I wish I would have known when I first tumbled down the rabbit hole. I hope it's helpful to someone. 1, you may feel like you are unraveling. 2, you may have psychic experiences. 3, your life might fall the f*** apart. 4, you will rediscover your inner child. 5, it's okay to seek support. 6, surrender is key. And 7, as you heal, your external world will change. 1, you may feel like you are unraveling. My spiritual awakening, I have to give you a little context. So my spiritual awakening started at a meditation camp in Thailand, and I'll give the very abridged version. In my late teens, early 20s, I was in a very not good place, and I was very interested in learning how to alleviate suffering. And so I was like, I'm gonna move to Thailand because it's very Buddhist, and Buddha must have figured it out, right? Like he ended his sufferings. Maybe I can take a page from his sutra. That was my grand plan. And toward the end of my time in Thailand, I went to a 10-day silent Vipassana retreat, so a meditation retreat, and I got really sick about a weekend. I had this like weird rash on my body, was getting like hot flashes, and just in general felt very ill. And so I caught a train, a sleeper train to Bangkok. And as I was falling asleep, I'm going to condense this part of the story a lot. I had a mystical experience, and it was completely earth-shattering to me because it totally went against everything that I thought was real, and I was very freaked out. So shortly after that, about a week after, I booked a plane ticket home to the US. I was supposed to stay and teach another semester, and I like noped out. I was like, there's no way. And I spent the next two and a half years in and out of doctor's offices because I had all of these weird physical symptoms. I had rashes and boils. I had these like hot, cold spells where it felt like there was electricity running up and down my arms. I would see flashing lights. I would go deaf in one ear. And so I thought that I either had something autoimmune, a brain tumor, like I was dying, or I had completely lost my mind. Looking back now, I would think of this as being a kind of spiritual sickness, like when we get so far out of alignment. This is an actual thing, according to, you know, woo-woo people. When we get so far out of alignment that our spirit actually gets sick. And it does this because it's trying to bring us back into alignment. It's like, hey, stop f***ing up your life. Go this way. Lo and behold, a lot of this cleared up when I started to entertain the idea that this had psycho-spiritual origins. You know, for the most part, people's spiritual awakening stories we're all very similar. Physical symptoms are a little less common, and I think it happened to me because I was so much in resistance. Okay, I think awakening in a lot of ways is harder if you're logical. It's harder if you don't already believe in some kind of higher power, and me being, how would I have described myself? Like existential and kind of nihilistic. Was about as far in the opposite direction as you could be. And so in a lot of ways, I'm a very like analytical, technical, Spock-like human. And I did not want to wake up, okay? I was very, very sleepy. I was like, I don't believe in this shit. The universe is not a friendly place. Magic isn't real. It's all make-believe. And you crazy new age hippies can take your sparkle rocks and your angel numbers and you can insert them into your sphincters. I was in complete denial. The more you try to stay sleepy, the harder God tries to shake you. And I was literally Sleepy the Dwarf. I was like, hey ho, and not letting this shit go. I know this metaphor is cliche amongst those of us who have awoken, but for the noobs, awakening is a lot like taking the red pill in The Matrix. It's been said that The Matrix was not a science fiction film, it was a documentary. And I don't mean that you're out there somewhere in space, like stuck in an adult placenta having your life force harvested by AI, although that is a metaphor for where we're headed if enough of us don't wake up. Did I hear technocratic convergence of humans and data? But the part of that movie that is so gosh diddly darn relevant is when Morpheus spills the reality tea and Neo is like,
no, I don't believe it. It's not possible.
And this is because a spiritual awakening can turn your world upside down. Not only are some of our most deeply held beliefs challenged, but as we'll look at in point 3, the things that aren't in alignment just start to crumble away. And so awakening can feel a lot like spiraling inward and falling upward at the same time, especially if you're attached to your ideas about what is real, what isn't real, and what your life is supposed to be. I came to think of it as being like unspooling all the ego's narratives, right? The unconscious conditioning, the stories we've told ourselves for a lifetime in order to arrive closer to the truth with a capital T, that we are one consciousness manifesting as infinite possibilities. And that takes us to point number 2. If you're not familiar with psi research, the connection between spiritual awakening and psychic phenomena may be a little fuzzy-wuzzy at first. I know that when I was first tumbling, I was like, what is it with these yoga people and their third eyes? Like, why are they obsessed with this? And it's because we are one consciousness manifesting as infinite possibilities. What most people don't realize about this field of study, call it parapsychology, ESP, psi research, psychic phenomena, whatever we want to call it, is that it hinges on the idea that consciousness is not limited to our brains. It is the fundamental force that connects all of life. Consciousness is the wellspring of the physical world, and everything is interconnected through this web of consciousness. We come forth through this source, we experience life through this source, and when we die, we return to this source. And that simple idea flies in the face of the world's dominant paradigm, which is materialism. Materialism tells us that matter is fundamental and that consciousness is just a happy accident in the human brain. I have another video just about this, but suffice to say, there are a lot of glaring holes in materialism. I just want to touch on 2 here. One is that classical physics, which materialism is rooted in, doesn't totally apply when we get down to the quantum level. Quantum plays by a different set of rules. We don't totally know what those rules are yet, but the post-materialist paradigm, of which psi is a proponent, would account for much of that quantum weirdness. 2, many people who have had mystical or transcendent experiences feel, through their direct experience, that consciousness is not an accident, it is not random, and it is not local. In other words, it goes way beyond the human brain. Through the process of awakening, we become more aware of this field, call it consciousness, source, spirit, the unified energy field, whatever you want to call it. We become more attuned to that thing. We have a noetic experience, to use a phrase from the Institute of Noetic Sciences, a noetic experience, noetic meaning inner knowing, implicit understanding, or a mystical awareness. In becoming more attuned to this field, we have more psychic experiences, and psi happens on a spectrum, right? Most people have had gut hunches or intuition at some point in their life. Here's the spectrum. Take a step further though, and we have synchronicity. Lots of people experience that. Precognitive dreams, sensing subtle energies, the clairs, right? Clairaudience, clairvoyance, claircognizance, clairempathy, clairsentience, all those things, all those fun things. Somewhere toward the middle of the spectrum, we have precognition and telepathy, and at the far end of the spectrum, we have things like out-of-body experiences and trance-channeling. I'm currently under the impression that our most profound noetic experiences are signposts. Our biggest intuitive hits often relate to our own life path, which is why I don't put much stock in paid fortune tellers. In other words, our psi experiences often point a direction. If prayer is talking to God, psi is how God talks back. I'll give you an example from my life because I'm the case study I know best. I'll sprinkle some other stuff in here too, but for the most part, you're stuck with me. So about a year after I first woke up, I was at my grandparents' house and I couldn't fall asleep for some reason. I just felt intensely afraid and uneasy in that room for no conscious reason. Not usually scared of the dark like ever in my life, but for some reason I was tripping. And I remember getting to that cuspy area somewhere between waking and sleeping. And all of a sudden I'm standing in the middle of the room. And I look over to the bed, and there's Kiara sleeping. And I look in the mirror, and there's an old woman with a headdress that has antlers on it and a mantle of raven feathers, and she's holding a staff. And she lifts her hand and says an incantation in a foreign language. And when she does this, it's like warmth and calm just fall over the room. It felt like an energetic hug is the best way I can think of to describe it, and I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up with the word shaman in my head, which was very strange because at the time, I didn't know what shamanism was. I only would have associated it with Native Americans. Come to find out a few years later that shamanism has existed in many, many cultures all over the globe throughout history. And what's really interesting about shamanism is that the shaman, it plays virtually the same role and has the same cosmology across cultures. The other thing that I felt about this experience was that the woman was Scandinavian. I knew that, and I felt like I had a really deep connection to her. And I thought maybe she was an ancestor, but I had been told my entire life that our family is Sicilian, Italian, and Irish. And that was it. Needless to say, shortly after that, I became enamored with Vikings. And a couple of years after that, my dad took a DNA test. Come to find out, we're Danish. And I was like, I knew it. I'm a Viking for Valhalla. Fast forward to today, and shamanic ideas have become a really important part of my journey. It's led to all of the teachers that I'm currently studying under. So just one example of how a noetic experience, in this case, I don't know what you would call it, a psychic dream, an OBE, some combination of, but an example of how a psi experience guided a person to go in a direction. Using myself as a case study because that's who I know. All noetic experience is made possible because of the unified energy field. As we awaken, what it really means to wake up is to become aware of the fact that this thing is interfacing with you. And the more we do this, the more attuned we become, the more we realize that that thing is fundamentally friendly. It is always trying to move us toward healing and wholeness. But most of us are really good at getting in its way, which is why sometimes we get the shit kicked out of us. 3, your life may fall apart. There's that joke that floats around the internet that when you have a spiritual awakening, you lose all your friends. And we laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's true. Many people experience a kind of tower moment in their awakening. Tower being a reference to the 14th card in tarot, and it's this crumbling structure representing parts of our life falling away. And I'm actually going to give an example from someone else's life because it's so literal. And you know what, actually, in thinking about this, I don't think that you have to have a spiritual awakening for God to be interfacing with you. I think you can have synchronicities pop off and things fall into place and other things blow up without realizing that there's like an order to this. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that what a spiritual awakening is being aware of this thing that is pulling strings. So this person, I don't know if they're having a spiritual awakening. I really don't know them. I just thought this story was really funny. So this person was debating moving between states. And they basically had a fun job and a cool place to live being handed to them on a platter. But he was apprehensive about moving from bustling LA to butt nowhere, Arizona. I don't blame him. Not everyone wants to live out in the middle of the desert. But one of the things he was debating was whether or not he was going to trade in his Mini Cooper, which is fine for the city, for a truck, because everyone in Arizona has to have four-wheel drive. And so he's sort of going back and forth on this, maybe procrastinating, but ultimately isn't like making a decision, until during the height of eclipse season, which is very telling, his Mini Cooper spontaneously combusts. It is sitting in his garage and it just blows the fuck up. And I was like, please, I didn't say this, but I was like, please, my dude, just pick up the phone. God is calling. The crazy new age people talk about this as being an energetic upgrade. And so the way they describe it is that when we ascend, right, we start vibrating at a higher frequency. And when we vibrate at a higher frequency, we attract things of the same frequency. And so those lower vibrational things fall away. I don't really like to think of it that way because, I'm sorry, but like is a Mini Cooper really higher vibrational than a truck? Like, how do you determine that? Or like, I think of the friends that I lost during a spiritual awakening, and I don't want to think of them as lower vibrational entities. I don't think of them like that, right? I think of it as we came to value different things. In the long term, these tower moments are a gift. In the short term, they're terrifying, especially when everything crumbles at once. And I'm going to tell you my story for this. So when I came back from Thailand and I was having all of this physical illness, I thought I was dying or going insane. I basically resigned myself to a life I didn't want. I was like, it's going to be very mediocre. Outwardly, I seem fine to people. Inwardly, I just live in a state of constant low-grade suffering. I'm like, this is the way it must be. I will endure. And when I die, I won't be sad. I did not see life as a great joy, as a gift. I saw it as a burden. I experienced it like it was something heavy that had to be carried. And on one hand, this is how I saw the world. On the other, I had this mystical experience in Thailand that made it very obvious I was missing something. And so there was this crazy cognitive dissonance, this tension that was building and building and building. And I felt like I was coming apart at the seams. It felt like I had flexed my spirit muscles and was trying to burst out of this ugly sweater that no longer fit. At the absolute lowest point, I remember walking through my apartment past a mirror, and I turned my head to look. What is it with mirrors? Again, I turned my head to look, and I did not recognize myself. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I don't mean like I didn't know who I'd become. I mean like I did not know that I was looking at my own face. And I watched helplessly as this hand comes up and smacks this face, and I say, wake up. And this really freaks me out because I did not make a conscious decision to slap myself. And I had just spent the past 2 years wondering if I was going insane. And I just like lost motor control and was saying things to myself I didn't understand. So I was like, case closed. I'm gonna go bark like a dog at my neighbors because I'm a loon. I didn't actually do that. What I actually had was a moment where of like complete calm, and I thought to myself, everything is gonna fall apart now. And I didn't despair. I was actually relieved. I was like, some part of me knew what was happening. Some part of me was like, thank you, thing that I don't understand, God. Thank you, God, for saving me from my dumbass self. Over the next couple of weeks, I lost an apartment, a boyfriend, and 2 jobs. Not 1 job, but 2 jobs. Total confluence of tower moments. But here's the thing. I hated that apartment. It had no natural light. It had the weirdest floor plan, and it was in a city that I really, really, really didn't want to be in. As for the boyfriend, it was one of those situations where I had totally settled into something I didn't want / wasn't attracted to, and just felt trapped. And that sounds terrible, but it's not like I was conscious of it at the time, okay? It's not like I was looking at the person I was with like, oh, you know what? Yeah, actually, you're not my counterpart. This relationship is like a warm security blanket because I thought it would be better than being alone. Like, no one consciously thinks that to themselves. You can't even see it when you're in it. It's like this. And it was the same thing with the jobs. I was devastated by the loss of that first job because I loved that job. It's the reason I had first come to Sedona on business. It was in California, but it had really just run its course. Like I couldn't grow anymore in the role. I'd learned everything I possibly could have. And at that point, they were also just so happened to be laying off their contractors. So worked out conveniently, but I didn't totally see it that way at the time. I did start to suspect shortly after my position was terminated at that first company, that something else was going on. I'm like, it's just too weird that I had the bathroom experience and then these losses happening one after the next. And like I mentioned, I had been to Sedona at that point and had come into contact with an entire city that seemed very aware that yes, there is a thing and it is interfacing with us. Like yeah, something's pulling the strings, you muggle. Like that's how people perceived me when I came here, and I loved that. And so I was very seriously entertaining the idea at that time that there is something pulling strings. I just didn't know if that thing was friendly or trying to with me. And then I lost my second job. And I remember walking out of that hostile ass workplace absolutely beaming. It actually freaked the people who had laid me off. It freaked them out a little bit because they looked at each other with this delicious glimmer of fear in their eyes because they totally thought I was going to sue them. But suing people doesn't make me happy. Freedom makes me happy. And so I walked out into that parking lot giddy with laughter because I knew everything was going to fall apart. Everything had fallen apart. There was nothing I could do about it, and I knew it was going to happen. And that would have scared me, except for the fact that I had another of those intuitive hits, and I was like, this is the turning point. I was like, I never would have ended up in any of these places if I thought my happiness mattered. So this is the turning point. Like this is an opportunity that has been given to me. And this is where things start to get good. I can feel it, Mr. Krabs. And that is where we're gonna leave off today. So tell me in the comments, where are you in your spiritual awakening? What have been some of your challenges, some of your blessings? I would love to have idea sex with you in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me. And until next time, stay blessed. Very blessed. All the blessed. Stop being slutty, chair. Ridiculous. I feel like a rainbow. I feel like a box of melted Skittles. I feel like unicorn diarrhea. God, I fucking love this shirt. So many color.